Welcome back to Majority Rules. It's been quite a week in politics, as every week seems to be these days. Where to even begin, especially when we start talking about the gender politics? Well, it is officially, first of all, the start of the real election season. We now have two official presidential candidates. Surprise, surprise, President Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Again, Trump, again. I know a lot of Americans not so thrilled, but I think there was a big sea change in the general attitude about the election after the State of the Union, when the president came out like swinging in every possible way. Lots of energy, his vim and vigor on full display, and I think it definitely shifted some people's thinking about him. I, for one, am really happy about the number of people who texted me and were like, oh yeah, I guess he's not mentally incompetent, which was a relief to me because I've had way too many of those conversations over the last few weeks. I don't even want to tell you how many times people have said to me, but I hear he's not mentally competent and he's so old and and all the old stuff is true, but he is still pretty sharp and with it, as he showed at the State of the Union. Some of us were a little frustrated that there wasn't more of a reference and focus to abortion. The president actually never said the word abortion, but lots of subtle politics going on in the room, and gender politics in terms of the guests that he and the First Lady had, both directly tied to the ongoing controversies around both abortion access and IVF. But then, of course, nothing was more dramatic in terms of highlighting the complicated gender politics of the moment than Senator Katie Britt's response to the State of the Union, which was really one of a kind and has sparked endless spoofs and riffs, which I really don't think was her intent. It's actually really sad in many ways, and I'm looking forward to talking to my guest about this, because Katie Britt has been a rising star in the Republican Party. She's someone who actually rejected, in some ways, Donald Trump. She won just without him. And it's, I don't think, good for anyone when any high-profile woman comes under that kind of fire. She definitely missed an opportunity there, but we'll talk more about that. But then in the same week, Congresswoman Nancy Mace, in her interview with George Stephanopoulos, flipped out a little bit about the questions that she was inevitably asked about supporting somebody who has been found liable for sexual assault when she herself is a sexual assault survivor. And I'm a big fan of Nancy Mace. We honored her a couple of years ago for her extraordinary leadership on gender-based violence, and I've always been a fan of hers. This was a tough moment, and I'm excited to talk to my colleague Alice Stewart about that in a minute. But look, the presidential is underway. It is the season, and we're going to finally start seeing maybe some real campaigning from the Biden camp. They seem not to have done much till now, and I think paid a little bit of a price for it. But it's on. It's time. We only have T-minus 8 months. I used to keep I feel like I should do it like in a prison cell where you draw the lines and you cross them out once a month, like counting down to the election. I don't know how many days it is. I'll have to get my producer to put a countdown to the election clock on the show. But there's going to be lots of gender politics in the 2024 election. Abortion is now, still will be, one of the major issues for the campaign, and we will continue to see the focus there. The First Lady just did an ad with Christina Aguilera. Not really sure why. Kind of a strange choice. But anyway, they just did an ad together about reproductive rights. I think we're going to see more of that. I would not have picked Christina Aguilera, weirdly. I don't think anyone... my kids don't know who she is, but all right, great. They got a celebrity. They could probably do better on that department. We'll see. Anyway, lots to talk about as the season gets kicked off. I'm not going to go on too long because I have my amazing friend and colleague, Alice Stewart, who is standing by and is going to join us. Alice, welcome to Majority Rules. I'm so excited to have you because, of course, you have had me so many times on your podcast with Maria Cardona, who was my guest last week, and your amazing podcast. What is it? Mic left to right, right? Wait, did I get it?
Hot mics from left to right. She's left.
Hot mics from
always right.
Yeah. Hot mics from left to right. And of course, everyone knows Alice from CNN and her amazing work there over many years. You may not know that she's also, are you still a fellow at Harvard?
I was a fellow twice. Now I'm on the board at the Institute of Politics at JFK School of Politics at Harvard. So I handle fellows orientation and study groups and guests and
So cool.
discussions that we have. So still very
someday I
involved.
gotta do it. Someday I really want. It's always been my dream to go back and do the Kennedy School at some point. The problem is I have 3 kids and I'm a single parent and I can't quit my day job or go to Boston. But
Yeah.
as soon as I can, that's what I plan to do because it always looks amazing. All right. So Alice, I've been like dying to talk to you about the lady politics of the right these days, because it does seem like it is just such a complicated and difficult time. You know, the female surrogates for Trump are just getting hammered in every direction. And then I mean, not just obviously Katie Britt and the response, which we could talk about all day, but also obviously now Nancy Mace and the sort of fire that she's under for her double standards. You've got Elise Stefanik, who, you know, has been sort of certainly vilified on the left. I'm interested in what you think about her because she's been such a rising star in the Republican Party for so long. She actually was the very first speaker that we had 10 years ago for the launch of All In Together. And, you know, I always really liked her. And it's just sort of a strange about face. And then now we have Kristi Noem and her dentist ad, which seems a little like a strange choice. I don't know what is happening with the women on the right.
Look, I think all of those names you mentioned, I think, are tremendous leaders in the GOP. And Elise Stefanik specifically has worked really hard to recruit women GOP candidates to run for office, and has really done a great job in leading that effort, and has brought more women into the fold in the House and Senate. So give her a great deal of credit. But look, you know, there's been so much talked about and discussed about Senator Britt's response to the State of the Union. And look, I'll be the first to admit it was quite dramatic. But the bottom line is the message that she sent. The message that she sent about President Biden's policies at the border are not working, and the fact that we have a surge at the border, and that needs to be addressed, and the fact that she looked at President Biden as not being able to do the job and being deficient on the job, and certainly pointing out the problems with the economy and how that affects women across the country. So the message overall was sound, that President Biden and his leading of this country and the policies aren't helping this country. And that's evidenced by the polls. We're seeing even after the State of the Union, which generally after the State of the Union is your greatest time to shine, and you have the State of the Union bump, his poll numbers by 538 dropped down to 37.5%. So that's not a strong
Although it's
sign.
so interesting because he, like, actually Maria was pointing out, and I thought it was really interesting that, like, yes, the poll numbers, but like he also raised more money in 2 hours than any person in history from a lot of small donors. So it's always a contrast. But like, let's stay with Katie for a minute, because I do think, look, I feel that Senator Britt was set up for a fail, and that she was done a serious disservice, because she is a serious person and she is a rising star, and they have so few young women in that kind of leadership. And she won in her own right, you know, in a very tough race with basically Trump running against her, right? So you know, we can joke about it because obviously, you know, my side loves to, like, you know, crack the jokes and make fun of the women, and Scarlett Johansson did a pretty good imitation, SNL as always, for the win. But like, what a shame, because she was sort of set up for a fall. And to your point about the policies, now whatever she said has been so overshadowed by the fact that she told this story about human trafficking, which turned out to be false or not the right, you know, completely misrepresented. And the woman who is in the story has come out to, like, disavow her. Like, it's a real issue that actually could have been a powerful point, but like, just the whole thing was so bungled, and it's such a disservice to her. And it kills me because I hate to see any, you know, there's so few Republican women in the Senate, there's so few women in the Senate still. It kind of kills me that they didn't do right by her.
Yeah, you're 100% right on all of that in terms of the speech should have been solid, foolproof, fact-checked backwards and forwards. And look, they can say that she didn't say exactly what she's being accused of saying, but the inference that this trafficking story, which is graphic and horrible and gut-wrenching and heartbreaking and should never have happened, that's a compelling story that needs to be told. But to infer that it happened under President Biden's watch and as a result of his policies, when it didn't, takes away from the whole argument that she's making, that Biden's policies are hurting this country with regard to the migrant surge, human trafficking, fentanyl, and I mean, many other
Real issues,
issues
like
at the
real
border.
things that are really happening, right?
Exactly.
I mean,
So that's an issue where it's an unforced error. There's no need to be loose with the truth when the truth in this matter is compelling enough. And that being said, that was a huge mistake, and the people that wrote her speech and vetted it and listened to her practice
or
it,
didn't.
there should have been a more real-time fact checking during that prep process. But at the end of the day, many Republicans look at the fact that she was spoofed by SNL was a badge of honor. Look, liberal
Mm.
Hollywood and New York liberals are always going to take the opportunity to make fun of a strong conservative female, and they did so. And having been working for many conservatives who have been spoofed on SNL, it's a badge of honor. But the
I mean,
point
this
is,
is why I love
it's
talking
much
to
easier.
you.
It's much easier to talk about that and the factual inaccuracies which shouldn't have happened, and maybe the overdramatic delivery, than the real substance of the speech.
Yeah.
Again, which was President Biden's policies at the border and his lack of desire to do anything about this for the last 3 years until Democrat mayors and governors have said enough is enough. We need to take action. So
I
again,
always love talking to you, Alice, because I think, you know, Americans don't get enough. We're so in a bubble. And especially given just the way our social media feeds are and just everything about the way we get given information. And I didn't mention before, but one of the things that I appreciate so much is that you sit on the board of All In Together, my nonprofit, and we are strictly nonpartisan. And obviously, my politics, and everyone understands that I'm a Democrat. But we've tried really hard in our work at All In Together to be as balanced and inclusive as possible. And your contributions have been invaluable. But I also feel like in conversations like this, like people do need to understand, like why what liberals see as this win, as you say, like making fun of Katie Britton on SNL, which was like inevitable. Like it was inevitable that was going to be spoofed because it was just too easy. But that, like, it was too easy. I mean, we
yeah.
can talk all day about the kitchen. Like, why did they put her in a kitchen? Come on,
Yes,
guys.
yes,
Take her
yes, and yes.
seriously. She's a United States senator. Put her
Right.
in her freaking office behind her desk because she's a baller. Like, and that was the thing that made me so mad. Not just that the content did her a disservice, but like the setting did her such a disservice. Like, put her in her office. Like, I understand, she wanted to be relatable and she's a mom first. We all understand that. But it also was like so dismissive of the fact that she's extraordinarily powerful. She has a huge job, right? There are two senators per state. It's she represents millions of constituents. Like that just did her such a disservice and like was so insulting, I think, to women. But the point is that I wanted to have this conversation with you because I think we are in these echo chambers, and like Democrats, like, are patting themselves on their back. Like they're so psyched, that it was a fail, but they miss that that's not necessarily how other people see it.
Right. And there are a lot of conservatives and those on the right who, look at the optics of that and roll their eyes, but they listen to the substance of the speech and are engaged. And that's just the difference. It's the Rorschach test of politics. Everyone's going to
Mm,
see what they want to see and take away what they want to take away. But
mm,
I can assure you that many Republicans are looking at that speech and focusing in on what she said about President Biden and the policies that he has enacted. And again, that's why these things are so hard. You have to have it look right and sound right and be right. You have to
yeah.
be factually accurate. So that's what makes these so difficult. Moving forward, the key is, what do you take away from that? What does she do now moving out, getting her message out there
Yeah.
and reinforcing the message that she put out there and using Republican surrogates to reinforce the message put out there. The unfortunate uh, downfall of that is that when conservatives were out there the next couple days after the State of the Union to talk about not just Biden's delivery and Biden's State of the Union, which I think, quite frankly, was extremely political and
It
angry
was.
and not what you would expect from Joe Biden, who campaigned on unity and normalcy. But that's State of the Union. But Republicans spent much of the time after the State of the Union talking about the factual inaccuracies of the sex trafficking story, and that shouldn't happen. Anytime you're on explaining, you're losing the discussion.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of earned media opportunities were wasted
we're lost.
because of that.
So I'm looking behind you on the shelf, and you have one of my favorite books behind you by my friend Ali Vitale, the book
Yeah.
Electable.
Yes. Yes.
We're gonna have Ali on the show soon, as soon as she gets some sleep. I actually talked to her yesterday, and she hasn't slept like in weeks. So we'll have
These
Ali
days.
on soon. But
Yeah.
we ought to talk about Nikki Haley now, because part of, so much of what Ali has written about, and as you know, my work is, and that we've talked about many times, the two of us, is about just the like impenetrability of these last glass ceilings. And what Nikki Haley did was truly extraordinary. And we've talked a bit on the show about just how history making she was. She's the only woman in history, only Republican woman ever to be a governor and hold a cabinet position, the first Republican woman ever to win delegates in the race for the presidency. I mean, really, truly extraordinary. So, what's your sense about what now? I mean, she clearly landed some serious punches. She has a group of supporters in some states, a very substantial group of supporters who have said that they are, who are truly never Trumpers, or who we think might be never Trumpers. So what's your sense about what happens with them now? Like, where do they go? What happens for the next 8 months?
Well, that's the big question is, where do Haley voters go? And I can't say enough how proud I was to see a strong, smart, conservative female go head to head with not just Donald Trump, but all of those Republican candidates, and stay firm on her values and true to her convictions. And
And
quite
she
frankly,
got better as she went along, right?
she
I mean, the
did.
longer she was in the race, the better she was. It was
They,
so impressive.
yeah, they all do. And a lot of that is because you're out there on the campaign trail and you have all these policy and these white papers in your head, and there's numbers and data. But when you're out on the campaign trail and you're talking to Joe Farmer and Sally, who works at the local bank, these numbers become personal stories, and you're able to not just, understand these policies, but put a face on them. And so all of them, I'll give all of them, got better because they were able to tell their policies in human terms. And that's much, much
Mm.
more impactful than reading a white paper on a stump. But I digress. But
Hmm.
that was fun to see, and they all did that. But look, the thing with Nikki Haley is that she wasn't just out there as a strong advocate for women. She was a strong advocate for her values, and she fought hard for the economy, for national security, for limited government. But she also fought for what so many people are hungry for, and that is doing away with the drama and the chaos and lowering the temperature in Washington
Telling the truth,
and
telling the truth.
telling the truth and saying one thing one day and saying the exact same thing the next day, and making your case against someone without being mean about it. And it was a refreshing campaign, and I would
Hmm.
like to see that be something that we strive for and get back to. And it wasn't just that she was a younger generation of leadership; she was a fresher generation of leadership, and I'd like to see we get to that point where we're back there. And her voters, look, for the most part, many of them are never Trumpers. So those people, where do they go from here? Do they sit on the couch? Do they support Joe Biden? Do they look at someone like RFK Jr.? That remains to be seen. There's a big argument to be made that the three candidates in November are Trump, Biden, and the couch. And a lot of people don't like Trump. A lot of people aren't real thrilled about President
Yeah.
Biden. So that's going to be the key for both of these campaigns, is to rev up the enthusiasm for voters that aren't really enthusiastic about either one of the candidates. And
But I guess the question is, like, do those voters, if the Haley voters, the never Trumpers, pick the sofa, that is more devastating for Trump than it is for Biden if, for instance, young people stay home, right? Because Trump already has, on a national level, obviously we could talk through the electoral college, but on a national level, I mean, he's already lost, right? So he lost the last election. The question is, like, if he can't gain market share, right? If he can't gain voters, he's in real trouble, right? I
right.
mean, I don't know. Do you think that's right? I mean, obviously, Biden's problem is whether or not young people are going to turn out. I mean, that's the biggest question for Biden, whether he can get his whole coalition out that voted for him in 20.
Right, and that's the challenge for both of them is to broaden their electorate. Look, we know Donald Trump's base is solid and deep, but it's narrow, and he needs to broaden that electorate and be more appealing to the independent voters and the disaffected Republicans that he has angered over the years. And a lot of that's going to come down to him making the case and softening his message to encourage them to come out and vote for him. And I haven't seen a whole lot of that.
I was
But
going to say that is like the opposite of what Trump does. I mean, he
yes,
doesn't, there's no, like, I mean, there's just no indication that he's ever going to do that, right? Because his whole MO is the strong man, right?
right.
Embracing Orban and, getting endorsed by a dictator. And, he's going to be a dictator on the first day. And I mean, this is not a guy who seems like he cares very much about whether or not he's welcoming with open arms, like suburban women who turned away from him in the last 4 cycles.
Right. And look, and I agree with that, but you also have to recognize he's swept the primary. He swept Super Tuesday. He swept this week. He's got the necessary delegates sooner than anyone uh, ever has. And we ran against him on the Cruz campaign in 2016. We were still fighting it out for 2 more months. So the fact that he
Mm-hmm.
swept this so soon
Mm-hmm.
tells you that no matter what you and I think, or a handful of us
Yeah.
feel, many Republicans, most Republicans are ready to put Donald Trump back in there. They don't care about his tone. They don't care about his insults. They don't care about those lawsuits. They don't care about the things that
The
he does
indictments.
that is insulting to many people, including women. They look at him as someone who's going to fight for them. They like the economy the way it was under his administration. They want him to get in there and secure the border, which he, didn't build the wall last time, but they trust him on the border more than they do Biden. So, it's easy for people that are skeptics to say he doesn't have what it takes, but a lot of Republicans say, I'd rather have him than Joe Biden.
So fascinating. All right. So Alice, in the last minute or so that we have left, like what do you watch in terms of what you think are like the most important indicators? I mean, we could talk all day about polling and how complicated it is, that sometimes they're right and often they're wrong. But what are you watching to keep your finger on the pulse of like where this is going in the next 8 months?
Enthusiasm is going to be key, and who can motivate voters to get on board with them. And what we're seeing is Donald Trump is going out there, he's campaigning, he's hitting the trail. Joe Biden is doing the same along with Vice President Harris. And you have to get, Joe Biden had the benefit of not having to go out and campaign quite as hard last time, and did a lot of it virtual. That's not going to be the case this time. And they have to go out and meet the voters, talk to them, and convince them one by one. And at the end of the day, a lot of people are going to vote on policy. How's the economy? How's immigration? How's the border? How's national security? But a big motivating factor is, do I like this person? Do I like Joe Biden? Do I like Donald Trump? And they have to convince the voters that not only should they like them, but trust that this candidate is going to fight for them in Washington and implement the policies that they want to see.
Awesome. I love talking to you, Alice, always. And I love the challenge that you issue to me. And I think I'm grateful for our friendship and that our ability to like have these really thoughtful conversations about different perspectives, because I've always believed that that was critical. And, when I wrote my book in 2016, I talked a lot about what I learned from President Bush and what I learned from the women friends of mine who have different political views from me. And in this like insanely polarized, nasty, difficult time, like there's so little of that. And there's so few forums where people can just have thoughtful, respectful conversations with each other. And they're really important to me. And I said this after I met President Bush. You and I have talked about this, that my relationship with President Bush like really changed my life in some very profound ways. Like it really opened me to think about politics in a more human way, to understand, to embrace the challenges that confronting difference like what that does when you can build friendships with people with whom you disagree, and how in so many ways that is actually the best kind of friendship. It's the most rewarding because you find common ground with somebody that you might not otherwise think. And I talk a lot about, my good friend Charity Wallace, and she was sort of one of my first like really close friends, conservative friends. And like my relationship with her has been magical. And I feel that way about you. And I know that it's part of also like your work in the work that you do with Maria on the show to like have these kind of respectful dialogues that open people's minds. And I'm really grateful for it always. So there was my long monologue about why I appreciate you, and I'm glad you came on the show.
Well, thank you. I'm blessed for your friendship. I'm blessed to be part of All In Together, and I think these conversations are so important because it's not about changing minds; it's about broadening your understanding of issues. And I get nothing out of this, but if I can throw a plug in there, I was at a book signing last night for Anita McBride and
Oh
her
yeah.
new book, Remembering the First Ladies, and this is about the first ladies of all the presidents from Martha Washington to
Yes.
Jill Biden, and the message is these aren't just wives, these are top advisors to presidents of the United
Yes.
States, and they tell the
Yes.
personal stories of first ladies, and I can't wait to dig into it. I read a few pages
I
last
love
night.
this. And I'm going to call Anita today and
Yeah.
ask her to come on the show because I am obsessed with these stories. And, we have 1 second left, and I'll just say, like, in the same way that my assumptions have been challenged by my conservative friends, the recent books about the first ladies have blown the walls off of the
Right.
things that I thought about them. The recent book about Nancy Reagan, the recent book about Lady Bird Johnson, and the ways in which the historic narrative of these women has been so dismissive of their contributions. And I talk about it all the time because this is one of those things where all of us have this kind of ingrained gender bias, even us females who don't realize the extent to which we sometimes don't take women seriously who deserve to be taken seriously. And the Nancy Reagan book in particular, I'm a child of the 80s. My parents worked in the Carter administration. I grew up in Washington. I mean, the ways in which the press skewered Nancy Reagan in such insulting and demeaning ways throughout my childhood, and I believed it. I
Right.
believed it because that was the narrative. And even my feminist mother would say, derisive things about Nancy Reagan. And I look back on it now and I realize, how wrong that was, that these women deserve their rightful place in history, that the world would be different had they not been in the roles that they were in. So I'm so glad you mentioned it, and do plug Anita's book. I'm going to have her on. I love Anita. She's
Good.
another one of my favorite Republicans. And so thank you, Alice, for all of your amazing work. We will be watching you throughout the presidential, and I'm grateful that you could be on the show. And thanks to everyone for tuning in to Majority Rules. This is exactly the kind of conversations that we're going to keep having now and into the future. The underreported, the underappreciated side of politics, the things you don't hear every night, that we don't have the time to talk about every night on CNN or on MSNBC or anywhere else, but are important conversations and help us fill in our picture of really how American politics work and the voices and the votes of all Americans and how much they matter. So thanks so much for tuning in to Majority Rules. I'm Lauren Leader. We'll see you next week.